I guess we can begin. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ben Tucker. I'm the first Deputy Commissioner for the NYPD. Over the past several months, we've seen an epidemic in suicides among police officers across cities, in cities across the country. And so it's clearly, in our view, a national problem. And that's no less true for our officers here in the NYPD, where so far this year we've had 10 officers take their own lives. In June, at the direction of Commissioner O'Neill, I convened a task force to address this crisis in the department. Over the past 4 months, we've moved with all deliberate speed to put in place a variety of wellness and health initiatives designed to encourage our officers to seek help and take advantage of the range of services available to them, and obviously with a view toward preventing suicides. This morning, we're launching one of those initiatives, which we call Finest Care. We're doing this in partnership with NY-Presbyterian. Finest Care is a free, confidential service that will provide comprehensive mental health services to any of our police officers asking for help. And I want to thank in advance, you'll hear from him later, but I want to thank CEO Steve Corwin, as well as Dr. Phil Willner here at NY-Presbyterian for their willingness to help us out as we go forward with this initiative. It's really critical for our members. I also want to acknowledge members of the department who are part of the task force here this morning, who provided critical support to the task force in our efforts as we've worked over these past few months. Assistant Chief Matt Pontillo to my right, Dr. Eli Kleiman, our Chief Surgeon there to Chief Pontillo's right, and then also Dr. Lokesh Reddy, our psychologist, who is our Director of Psychology. Also want to acknowledge Inspector Nicole Papamichael from our medical division, the CEO there, and as well Chief John Clune from our Personnel Bureau. And finally, I need to thank and really appreciate Greg Roberts and Susan Birnbaum's help from the Police Foundation for their efforts in support in making it possible for us to expedite the Finest Care initiative with the hospital. And now I'll turn it over to Mayor de Blasio.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Tucker. I want to thank you. I know you started out as a beat cop years ago and have spent your whole life in law enforcement, and a lot of it focused on the needs of our officers and how we can make sure our officers are safe and they're also well. And I know for Chief Pontillo and for so many of the other leaders of the NYPD here, it has been a life's work protecting this city. But there's always been understanding that our officers need to be there for each other, and our city has to protect our officers. And so this work that you've all done, I know it has been something you have put your whole heart into, making sure that every tool, every resource, every option is available for our officers. And this is an important initiative today because it's going to save lives. I just want this to be clear from the beginning. What's happening here at NY-Presbyterian will save lives because people will get help, and that help will make all the difference. There's a lot of pain we are all feeling. This year has been a shock to all of us. 10 officers, it's unimaginable. And all over the city, people are feeling this pain all over the department, but particularly the families who lost their loved ones. Everyone is searching for understanding of why we are experiencing something so different than what we saw before and all the ways that we can address it. And it begins with bringing these issues out in the open. So we're going to talk today about help that will be there for our officers, but it all requires people to understand it's important to come forward. to come forward and seek help. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's for family members too, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The crucial role that loved ones play in encouraging an officer who needs help to feel comfortable coming forward and accepting it, and getting informed on the ways that, as loved ones, they can support the member of their family going through a crisis. This is something we're talking about in our whole society, but it's particularly important for our law enforcement officers, again, many of whom feel that if they come forward in some ways, people might think differently about them. We have to dispel that notion from the beginning. And I'll talk about my own personal context in a moment, what I saw in my own family. I want to emphasize always the strong thing to do is to come forward when you have a problem and to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with it. I want to thank everyone who's been a part of this and of all the efforts that we undertake to make sure that mental health services are available and that we destigmatize the entire question of mental health, because we have to do that for everything else to work. I want to thank, from the NYPD, Assistant Chief Matt Pontillo and Dr. Eli Kleinman, the Supervising Chief Surgeon. Both of them with Commissioner Tucker have put a lot of heart and soul and time and energy into making sure that this initiative and all the other initiatives are moving to help our officers. I want to thank Susan Herman, the Director of the Office of Thrive NYC, and until not long ago also NYPD, for the important work she is doing. And as Ben mentioned, a great thank you to the Police Foundation for all the support that they provide our officers. They've really played a crucial role on this issue, on so many other areas, and thanks to Executive Director Greg Roberts, who's with us. Also here at New York Presbyterian, I want to thank Dr. Judith Suker, who will be the Finest Care Program Director. So she will be the lead making this initiative come to life and making sure that our first responders have this help when they need it. And she has a lot of history. She's the right person for the job. She has a lot of history working with and supporting our first responders. So we know that we're coming together here because of a lot of pain, but we also are here with a sense of resolve. And we have to have hope that making these changes will reach people who need it and save lives. And what New York Presbyterian is doing is creating a separate, independent place that our officers can turn to. And not just any place, a world-renowned institution that officers can have the assurance they can turn to whenever they need. This is against a backdrop of a mental health challenge in our society that is coming out in the open like never before. We're finally acknowledging that 1 in 5 adults has a mental health challenge. We're seeing things and being honest about things that used to be swept under the rug. And I'll talk about my own family in a moment, but as I do it, I will admit it took me a long time to be able to talk about suicide in my family, to be able to talk about what happened with my father. For years and years, even in public life, I just wasn't comfortable being open about it. And I don't blame anyone who feels it's a topic that we don't know how to talk about, because we don't. But we all have to break through together. And when someone is thinking about suicide or talking about suicide, that right there is all we need to know, that someone needs help immediately. But I think we can all acknowledge that for a long time, just the way our society functioned, in fact, people would say it out loud and nothing would happen. Or, it would be laughed off or ignored. And those days have to end. On top of what we're facing in our whole society, including, tragically, an increase nationally in suicide across the board, we have to look at the specific challenges our officers face. And when Commissioner O'Neill and I were talking about this a few days ago, talked about just the sheer fact that our officers see a lot of trauma. They see a lot of human pain. They're there to help people in some of the toughest moments in their lives, but they then share in that experience. Even if they're the savior, they still see that pain, and they deal with a lot of stress and a lot of challenges. We're going to be doing initiatives like this, but we're also going to be working to try and find ways to make the work our officers do, the life that they live as police officers, easier. Because it's not just about mental health challenge, it's also just everything that happens day to day for an officer. Trying to make sure that their quality of life as officers constantly gets better, because that's one of the ways to address the stress. So that work will carry on as well. But we can say, even against the backdrop of a topic that we're all still learning to talk about, we can say we know some things for sure. And this is a message to our officers. You're a part of the greatest police force in the world. That is a fact. And you serve us very well. And you've made this the safest big city in America. And the people of this city are grateful. And we need to be there for you. And that's why what we're talking about here at New York Presbyterian is so important, because if you have a problem, we all have a problem. If you have a problem, your whole family has a problem. If you have a problem, you have a right to help. And if you have a problem, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with having a problem and coming forward and seeking help. So I mentioned that it was hard for me to talk about my dad in public places. And part of it is because it never made sense to me how someone who wore a uniform as well, the uniform of the U.S. Army, was an officer, served in battle, decorated by any normal measure, a war hero, could go through such pain and decline so rapidly and not be able to acknowledge it and not be able to seek help. And having lived through it, I can tell you that people are told over and over again what it means to be strong, what it means to be the protector and the guardian. I understand why it's hard for someone who's been told that their whole life to seek help for themselves, or someone who's been told how strong they are to act on a problem that they might feel displays weakness, but it's not weakness. It's part of being human. I now realize, I couldn't understand it as a kid, but I realize it now. My dad was not weak because he had a problem. He was a human being. In fact, his problem stemmed from having exhibited so much strength and gone through so much, including battle. But at the same time, we have to say, there's nothing to celebrate about holding a problem in and suffering in silence. That's not stoic. That's not something to applaud in this day and age, because we're losing people. We should applaud people who can come forward and say, I do need help, and we should say there's nothing wrong with that. We thank you for coming forward. So today, this announcement gives our officers a whole new place to turn. And Finest Care will provide a range of mental health services for all of our uniformed officers. And this will start on Monday, this coming Monday. It will be a 24/7 service. I want to emphasize to all our officers that you can call 24/7. It is confidential. It is free. I'm going to say the number twice. It's 646-697-2020. Again, 646-697-2020. And I want to say something else to our officers, and this is common sense. If you think you should pick up that phone, you should pick up that phone. If you're lingering by the phone wondering if you should make the call, you should absolutely make the call. If you call and then the challenge you face is resolved quickly, God bless you, that's wonderful. But if it's going to take some time, if it's going to take some attention, well, then thank God you made that call. There's nothing to lose from making that call. Dr. Corwin in a moment will go over the details. And I will say what I don't think he would say, because he's an honorable and modest man. I will say that this is one of the finest healthcare institutions, not only in the city, but in the world. And so when we call it finest care, of course, we refer to New York's finest, but we're also sending a message that this is the highest quality care anywhere. And this is one piece of a larger effort, which certainly includes the peer counseling that's available to all officers, including in their precincts. And as I mentioned before, there's another piece of the puzzle, and it's so important, which is the loved ones and the family members. And again, I know this from firsthand experience. Family members can feel powerless. They can feel confused. They can be looking for answers. Finest care is specifically for officers, but for family members who need guidance, who need help, who need to know how to handle situations, 24/7, you can call 888-NYC-WELL. I want to emphasize how important it is. You should never feel alone. You should never feel powerless. You should never feel without the tools or the information you need. If an officer in your life is going through a crisis and you don't know what to do about it, you don't know how to counsel your loved one or what to say, call 888-NYC-WELL. And there's a trained counselor who can help you 24 hours a day and literally talk through the scenario with you confidentially and help you know what to do. So no one, whether an officer or a loved one, no one should ever feel alone. And no one should ever feel that there isn't a place to turn. There is a place to turn. There is help available. So before I turn to Dr. Corwin, just one last point. What we've learned about mental health is it involves all of us. There's a lot of different social challenges. We see something on the news, we think, oh, that's about someone else. With mental health, it's actually about all of us because it basically touches every single family. Between mental health, substance misuse, including opioids, these issues at this point basically reach almost every single family. And that means everyone can be part of making sure that these crucial options, that they're known. Something like finest care is known to those who need it, that they know they can take advantage of it, that 888-NYC-WELL is known to anyone who's dealing with any kind of substance issue or mental health challenge. Everyone in this city can help everyone else to know that help is always available. And we've seen some tragedies where something as simple as someone saying, no, wait, call this number could have made all the difference. Or a family feeling that there was no shame in reaching out for help could have made all the difference. We all have to spread this word to address this challenge once and for all. With that, again, thanking him for the extraordinary partnership in this program. We are really, as a city, as a police department, we are honored to be working with New York Presbyterian, and they stepped forward with real passion here. It's my pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of New York Presbyterian, Dr. Stephen Corwin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the kind words, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner. First, let me say the honor is all ours. This is the finest police force in the world. We have a profound obligation to this city, and we have a profound obligation to those people who protect and serve us. And we feel that awesome sense of responsibility in this program. We feel very confident that we can help. We feel very confident that we will save lives. I will say I appreciate, Mr. Mayor, your honesty about mental health issues in your family, but I would challenge anybody in this room, and it's quite a large room, to say that they did not know somebody who had a mental health issue or a substance issue or a family member who had that, or themselves. And as the mayor said, 20% of the people in this country have one form of mental health issue or another. And we have to destigmatize that. We have to destigmatize that to allow people to safely seek treatment to make sure that they can get better and get well. It's especially important that our police officers feel that they can seek this protection confidentially, receive the very best care from the very best psychiatrists, psychologists, and we intend to offer a program where the sanctity of their confidentiality is always there, but that they feel that there is a hand helping them along the way. These are very tough jobs, but you all know that mental health issues affect every socioeconomic strata, every color, every person, and it's not just limited to those in the NYPD. But in particularly stressful jobs, these things can come to the fore quite quickly. So Dr. Willner, Dr. Sukor will give you the details of this program, but I again want to say we're honored. The honor is all ours, and we intend to work shoulder to shoulder with the city, with the police department to make sure that we deliver the goods on this one. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And now turning to Dr. Philip Willner, who Senior VP and Chief Operating Officer in New York Presbyterian Westchester Division and leads one of the top behavioral health programs in the country and also one of the architects of this new initiative. Dr. Willner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As the representative of the clinical team, I want to let you know how honored and privileged we do feel here at New York Presbyterian to play a part protecting the mental health and well-being of our police officers. These are men and women who protect and serve our communities every day. Allow me for a moment to speak as a clinician. We know that taking care of our city, serving this great city, is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Our police are in constant hypervigilance, ready to respond to the challenges that they may face with barely a moment's notice. With that responsibility comes enormous stress. And we all know that people often do not know where to turn when they feel enormous stress and emotional hardship. They often don't know how to handle it. The mayor described this very poignantly. This is magnified many times over when the person is on the front line, taking care of millions of our citizens and the visitors who come here every day. So with that in mind, I'd like to speak directly to the men and women in uniform and explain to them how the program will work and the importance of this program. I want to underscore some of the things that have been said here this morning, and the most important point is that help is just one phone call away. You as police officers may feel that there are no answers or there are no solutions to the problems that you face, the problems that trouble you. But I'm here to say that there are answers, and we can help you find the solutions. We as clinicians do that. We do that every day. We do that for all of our patients who have experience doing this. We care for people in these situations. We will help you find the answers and create the solutions to the challenges that you may be facing. Now, we've tailored this program to the unique stresses that police officers face, with special techniques and strategies designed to be most helpful. So if you feel distress, if you feel you're struggling emotionally, or worse, if you feel like giving up, Finest Care is here to help. So just pick up the phone anytime, day or night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Dial that number and someone will be there to answer. You will speak to a trained coordinator who will help you schedule an appointment with one of New York Presbyterian's affiliated psychiatrists or psychologists. And I want to emphasize something that the mayor said. This is a confidential program with no cost to you. It has been set up so that no one at the NYPD will know that an appointment has been made or that you've sought service. I'll repeat that. No one at the NYPD will know that an appointment has been made or that you've sought service. So we hope that this independence and this special confidentiality will make it easier for you to seek care. As the mayor said, if you're unsure whether to call, whether your problem is too big or possibly too small to call, call anyway. Speak with one of our counselors, and we will help you decide how to proceed. It will take 5 minutes, but it may turn out to be the most important 5 minutes of your life, so make that call. And let me close by underscoring, repeating something that has been said, perhaps the most important point of this briefing. And it cannot be said enough. We all need help sometimes. There is no need to struggle alone. No issue is too big or small. No issue is something that we don't have experience understanding. You are there to support us, and we are here to support you. So pick up the phone should you have the need, and we'll be there to help. The mayor shared the number. I'll repeat it. The number is 646-697-2020. And as of early Monday morning, we'll be ready to go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Willner. Beautifully said. And I'm just going to take something you said I thought really crystallized. I'm going to change it just a little bit. You said the 5 minutes that call. You said those 5 minutes might be the most important 5 minutes in your life. I'm going to say it a little differently. Those 5 minutes might save your life. That 5-minute phone call might save your life, might keep your family whole. So I agree with you 100%. And again, the spirit you've heard here from New York Presbyterian, the spirit of this is a institution beloved in this city that wants to give back to our officers and is ready, willing, and able to do it starting Monday morning. And thank you again to the whole team for all you are doing. Let's take questions from the media on this initiative, and then we'll talk about other topics. Gloria.
Mr. Mayor, I just wonder if you could, someone here can walk us through what would happen if an officer, what happens when that officer makes that call? Are they connected with a counselor and then set up with someone they can come and see? They make an appointment. What does it look like?
Yes, I'll respond. So if someone makes the call, we have people, representatives, coordinators who are available 24/7 manning the phone, so there'll always be a person answering the phone. That person will connect based on the needs, because different people will call with different needs based on the need. That coordinator will connect the officer with a psychiatrist or psychologist, and the officer will then go to somebody's private office, and it will move forward there the way clinical care moves forward in typical circumstances.
Phil, you just want to describe the training of a coordinator?
Yes, so these are coordinators who do this work in many of our programs. They're people who have clinical training to understand how to speak with somebody on the phone, how to elicit clinical information in an empathic, compassionate way. By and large, people who call are anxious. By and large, people who call are uncertain as to what's going to happen. We have the experience of dealing with that.
And you mentioned the privacy aspect of this, that the department won't be notified if someone seeks help. Why are you making that clear? Is there still something within the department that's going on in terms of the rules about what happens to an officer if they seek help? Because some of what we've heard recently is that officers are concerned about seeking help or taking certain medication and the consequences that might have on the job. So has there been a change?
I'm going to make a common sense point and then turn to the experts to speak in more detail. So we have a problem in this society when it comes to acknowledging mental health problems, right? We have a stigma, we have a wall up for everyone, not just our officers. And then on top of it, officers are concerned, and I don't blame them because of everything that's swirled around for years and years and years about mental health, that if they show some vulnerability, it could have a negative result. That's why we're trying to emphasize from the beginning, this is confidential. Pick up that phone. I mean, we've lost 10 good people, and I believe in my heart, had they understood, at least in some of the cases, that help was there, that might have been saved. So we need people to not worry about all the other possibilities and concerns, but just think, I can pick up this phone, I can speak to a medical professional, it's confidential, no one needs to know about it. It's free, there's just nothing in the way, just pick up that phone. That's what we're trying to get across first and foremost. That's why confidential and free is such an important part of the equation. Go ahead.
And I would just add, and then I'll ask Matt and maybe Dr.
Hang on,
Reddy.
guys, we're having a problem up front here. I don't know, I have not had this at other press conferences, so Freddie, do you gotta do something here?
Can we just get you guys just to stay down or pick a side, no more jumping around, please?
Okay? This is like, now guys, we're just listen, everyone. This is real simple. We have a serious topic. We're having a problem back there with here. Just everyone get arranged once, and we can all continue our conversation. Go ahead.
Okay, so what I was about to say was some of the challenges there that Gloria, that you referenced, we've tried to, as part of among the initiatives that we've been engaged in over these past several months, is to really think about and deal with the myths that are out there. First of all, try to get some factual information into the hands of our officers so they understand just what the process is and what happens in terms of their concerns, particularly around having guns and when they're taken, when they're not, having their shield. I mean, we changed our policy with respect to that so that if your guns are taken for medical reasons, for example, we will let you keep your shield because of the mayor alluded to it a little bit, which is when you're a cop, you are, the shield, the gun becomes part of your identity, it's your job, and so that's what we have begun to sort of understand that and try to deal with those myths. But I would ask Dr. Kleiman or maybe even Matt to or Dr. Reddy to chime in if just to give you a sense of how we're dealing with it. And the one last thing I'll say is that we do have, hundreds of officers who seek out help. I mean, it's not all of them who decide. It's not as if we're not getting officers calling to our family assistance unit, through our family assistance services, or through our employee assistance unit and so forth. So and other areas like PAPA.
I guess the more pointed question would be, how does the department make that determination about whether an officer's gun should be taken or if they need to be reassigned, depending on whatever it is they're going through or the treatment that they're receiving?
Let me first say that the department is not going to be involved in making those decisions with people who are calling this number. We have had a long history, a very good history with New York Presbyterian, and we know what their training is of their clinicians, and they also know the culture and the rules of the job, what's required to be a full-duty police officer. There's a misconception out there on the part of many officers that if they're seeking mental health counseling of some sort, that they're automatically going to be, their duty status is going to be changed, their guns may be removed, that they may not take medications. These things are all being dispelled. The physicians at New York Presbyterian know what combinations of medications may pose a problem and which ones may not and will be efficacious. So they're going to apply all of that knowledge that they have both about the department and about psychiatry and psychopharmacology in making those determinations, and we trust that those are going to be sound as they've always been in the past.
Okay. Yeah.
Two things, just to clarify on that last point. So is there any scenario in which you could enter this program and due to a determination by a doctor or anyone else, you would in fact have your gun withdrawn, or is that completely off the table that they will not tell the NYPD under any circumstances?
No, all clinicians, all clergy, whether they're in law enforcement or not, are bound by the same rules and regulations that are promulgated by the state, the SAFE Act. And I think everybody understands that if somebody is over the line of posing a danger either to themselves or to the public, that there are certain actions that need to be taken, and everyone will pull that cord at that time. But short of that, the NYPD will be out of the loop in the regard that the clinicians will be handling it here.
Okay, and then secondly, just as far as the payment aspect, so it's free to the officers. Is it just as simple as you call, it's completely free, the city pays the bills, or does your insurance, do you use your insurance at all?
So we are not using insurance here. The city will be funding this program. It's been funded. This has all been arranged, and the officer will not have any charges.
Does it
extent to concerned family members, what would be the procedure for them to call if they're concerned about an officer, a spouse, a parent?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and say, no, that's why we're emphasizing, and please, everyone, this is so important to get out in your coverage. Family members can call 888-NYC-WELL, and again, 24/7 trained counselors get guidance on how to deal with whatever the problem that their loved one is facing in terms of mental health or of a substance problem, whatever it is. But this is for active duty officers, the NYPD.
I just wanted to clarify, under the New York SAFE Act, so if an officer came to New York Presbyterian and was deemed to be a risk either to themselves or to the public, you would have to remove their firearm or refer that to the New York SAFE Act through that process.
That's correct.
Yeah, Marsha.
Mr. Mayor, given the fact that a lot of police officers have been reluctant to come to the NYPD for help, do you think you should have established a program like this sooner? Because this is like one step removed from actually going to a police officer, rather it's more independent.
I'll start, and my colleagues may also want to answer that. Marsha, we keep learning what our officers need. I think this crisis this year has been a shock to the NYPD and to all of us. And it is clear that we need more ways for people to get help. And this, in putting together this initiative with New York Presbyterian, really making sure officers knew it was confidential and it was free and independent. So to your very point that they had a whole different place they could turn. I think these last months have been a shock to all of us, and we've come to the view that, we've got to put everything we can on the table to see what will work.
So do you think that Thrive should have been on top of this program earlier as well?
I think it's, as I said,
Such an ongoing problem, and this was what Thrive was originally established to do.
well, Thrive was established to address the whole range of mental health challenges, and this is what we know about this city and this country, is there is no mental health strategy in this country. And before Thrive, there was no mental health strategy in the city. So I want to, it's an important point you're asking, like what was the origin? The origin was, as we all started out together, we saw so many issues keep coming back to mental health, and there was literally no strategy, no attempt to bring the different agencies of government together to address the issue of mental health. We got a long, long way to go. This is a massive societal problem. Again, almost every family affected, and we are starting so close to from scratch, it's really troubling when you really look at the whole overall situation. But no, I've talked to the commissioner and our colleagues here about this. I think there was a strong view that the NYPD had put out options for officers, and in fact, they were taking up those options. And then this year has jolted that assumption.
Yeah, I mean,
Thrive should have done more, though.
Again, I think on all fronts, we now see that we needed to put other tools into the equation, but we didn't know that now. Then we know it now.
and I would just add that Thrive has been a huge asset in terms of our partnership as part of the task force activities and providing a whole range of training. I mean, we've now trained, Matt, how many?
So Thrive has been
200
instrumental
plus commands
in assisting us. We began with executive level training to acclimate our executives to the issue as well as the services that are available. Thrive was a partner in that. We also built a command level training program where we've been sending clinicians out to every NYPD command to address roll calls, talk to cops, talk about the services that are available and explain to them the warning signs and the symptoms, and then to elicit feedback. We visited well over 200 commands, and that process is ongoing. They've also connected us with other clinicians to help us develop additional training. And they've also helped deliver mental health first aid training to hundreds of officers so far. And all of that's ongoing and continuing.
Good.
I don't understand whether a person who gets help loses a gun, loses a shield, keeps the gun, keeps the shield. What are the conditions that determine what level of being on the job you get to do if you seek mental health?
Can I start with something, again, common sense? I really think we have to put the horse before the cart and then let my colleagues talk. The vast majority of situations our officers face, like all of us, do not rise to the level where we'd have any discussion of taking away a gun or badge? And I understand it's a very fair question, but I'm beseeching everyone in the media, do not misrepresent this. This is about life and death. Most people who are dealing with a challenge, whether it is in their personal life, a financial situation, some stress in their family, whatever it is, they need someone to talk to. They need help figuring out how to get ongoing support. It never rises to this. And my colleagues, how many officers already utilize some form or another of mental health support, broadly speaking, in a given year, or however you want to take it? What could you give us some kind of universe?
So I'll give you the context, and Dr. Kleinman will talk about the process. So just looking at 2018, for example, we had over 1,200 uniformed members of the service interact with the NYPD Medical Division for some reason. They had some issue, and the medical division...
on mental health, just to be clear.
On mental health issues, right. not physical injury or physical health issues, but on a mental health issue. Of that more than 1,200, approximately 300 of those became a case where some additional follow-up was required. Of that 300, only approximately 100 had their firearms removed and their duty status changed because of the severity of their condition. To date, over 80% of those have already had their firearms restored because they've gone through some course of treatment. So that is the rare exception, and it is really a case-by-case determination based upon the severity of the condition and the treatment that is involved. And Dr. Kleinman will talk more about that.
Well, I think the Chief has said it exactly as it is. Many people who have mental health challenges feel that they have a diagnosis that brands them forever. They don't realize that very often brief therapies that are designed by the clinicians will help them ameliorate their symptoms and find solutions to their problem. And as the Chief said, in the vast majority of cases, if a firearm is temporarily removed because of certain medications that are not compatible with that, they are, for the most part, returned in very short order. On the rare occasion that somebody has a lifelong problem or an ongoing problem that's not amenable to short, brief therapy, then other decisions are taken.
Are the NYPD's mental health staff that you just mentioned bound by the New York SAFE Act as well, or was that a departmental decision to remove the firearms in those cases?
No, it's the standards of care nationwide.
Go ahead.
Just one thing, you said 1,200 people were treated last year. What do you think the unmet need is? Like, how many more officers do you think need mental health treatment? And then is there any consideration to expanding this program to other hospitals? I know anyone can phone in, but a lot of cops don't live in the Manhattan area, so any consideration of expansion?
Well, on that one, just to clarify to the team from New York Presbyterian, that phone often is the way that people handle this, but we'll just clarify phone versus in-person, the different options and how people go about it.
So the phone that we were talking about is a way to set something up. There will be an in-person office visit. And by and large, treatment does occur face-to-face in an office. There are ways to make other possibilities available. We're exploring some of those. Telepsychiatry, telehealth is a new option, and we're beginning to think about some of that. That's not in the early phases of this, but that is a possibility. We have strength in that area at New York Presbyterian. So there are ways to provide service in ways that will make it work for the officer who calls.
And with respect to the first part of your question regarding whether or not we can estimate or know what number of our officers have issues, that's not a number we can even point to. I mean, that's part of the challenge we have. That's why we ask people. Still on?
We have multiple locations where we can deliver that care. It's not just at 68th Street or 168th Street or Lower Manhattan. We have hospitals throughout the city, and we can make the arrangements to meet the patient where they need to be met. So I would not worry about somebody from Brooklyn or Queens not being able to access care because they can't get into Manhattan or don't want to get into Manhattan. That's point number one. And point number two would be that, as Dr. Willner said, We're experts in telepsychiatry, and we can offer that and do that for child and adolescent psychiatry as well as psychiatry in the emergency department. So we think we have a very broad reach. And what we've committed to the mayor and the commissioner is that we will meet the patient where they need to be met and we'll take care of the problem. So if there are logistic problems, we'll deal with that. And something that Marsha said earlier, I just wanted to comment on. This is a very thoughtful city administration, a very thoughtful mayor, and a very thoughtful police department and police commissioner. This is not a knee-jerk response. This is a thoughtful response to an emerging problem that has gotten worse. And as I said, we're honored to participate in this. A lot of thought has gone into this, and it's not just to take a class picture around this. This is a real program which we believe will yield real results.
Commissioner Tucker.
And just to finish up, I mean, so no, we can't estimate how many of our officers will need services. But with respect to the growth of it and using other hospitals or enlisting their services at this point, no, we're going to wait and see. I mean, we're rolling this out. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how many of our officers take advantage, and we hope many do. And then we'll decide going forward just what the need may be if it tends to be too much for New York-Presbyterian to handle. We don't expect that'll be the case, and we hope it's not the case.
Go ahead, Anna.
Mr. Mayor, what's the cost to the city, and what office is that money coming from?
I don't have that in front of me, and as I've said, I want to emphasize what I've said from the beginning. This is by whatever means necessary, whatever cost it takes. There you go. Thank you.
And then I had another follow-up. I'm just curious, from my understanding, off-duty police officers are required to have a gun in their presence in their home. I don't know if that's correct, but obviously the access to firearms is one of the main reasons that people kill themselves with guns. So in the instant where you think, oh, I want to kill myself, if you have a gun in your home, it's very easy to make that decision quickly versus, some other suicide method. And I'm just curious if there's any discussion around maybe why officers or when they are supposed to have their guns.
I'm going to, before turning to my colleagues in the department, again, I want to, it's a very fair question, but I am concerned that we're looking at this outside the context of this whole department. It's 36,000 officers who do extraordinary work. You heard already that so far the 1,200, I think that was in a year, is that right?
1 year.
1,200 members did reach out for help, of whom the vast majority were able to get help that did not have the kind of bigger ramifications we're talking about here. I just want us to keep this conversation a little grounded. The vast majority of members of NYPD have not, to the best of our understanding, needed this help, but whoever does need it will get it. So when it comes down to a situation of someone potentially using their firearm in that way, it's a very, very rare situation. So I just want to frame it that way. Now, as to the question of whether there is reconsideration of the policy and explaining how the policy works,
The answer is no. We're not reconsidering how we have our officers deployed and when they have their firearms. We're not asking them to leave them at the precinct. Remember, our job is to keep the city safe, and we do that by deploying our officers whenever the need arises, 24/7, 365. And so, no, we're not considering nothing suggests to us at this moment, given the challenge that we have, of making any changes in our firearms possession policies for our officers.
To that, just doing like quick math, I think about like 6,000, if you go with the 1/5 of people have some sort of mental health problem, about 6,000 members of the NYPD would be part of that.
As you can imagine, it's not as mechanical as that, but yeah, if you use a very broad approach.
Does this program have the capacity to serve, more than like 6 times the 1,200 or so people last year who sought help?
Again, I'm going to do one other ground rule on the question before turning to these folks. There's multiple ways that officers can seek help. And as you are hearing, they already have been seeking help in the existing ways. So I don't think it's going to be everyone just goes to this option. I think you're going to see a lot of officers, and again, experts will confirm if you agree. Some officers will prefer peer counseling in their precinct or other options. Some officers will prefer this. But in terms of capacity and how many officers you can handle,
We're partners, and if the capacity needs to be increased, we'll increase the capacity. We're doing this at cost, and if people take advantage of this and more is necessary, we're committing to this over the long haul for the city and the NYPD, and we'll be there. So if we've underestimated the need, that's our problem to address, and we'll make sure that we address it.
Dave.
Just to clarify, this in no way replaces what we currently have. This is just a supplement. But roughly how many do you expect? Because you have to plan for what the officers are going to be doing in the future. Out of 1,200, let's say if we have an average of 1,200 every year, what percentage roughly do you think will go with the confidential through Presbyterian and those who will choose to stay with?
Dr. Suger can give you an estimate of what we estimate, and she will be running the programs.
And I think what we're trying to do is enable us to treat as many people as possible. And so we're starting with a team of over 25 clinicians who are ready and willing and able to take people who are calling, and we'll build from there, and we'll meet the need as it comes in. I think with a program like this, we can't really anticipate. We're urging people, please call us so that we can, personalize treatment for you, get you to access the care you need. I anticipate not everybody is going to call at the same time. People get discharged from treatment, but we are going to step up and meet whatever need there is. We are committed to that.
Administratively, who from the city is going to be measuring success in administering this program? Is it Thrive? Is it NYPD? And what is a measure of success here?
Start with NYPD.
Well, we'll have a sense. We won't be violating the confidentiality part of this, but we've worked out a system by which we'll at least know how many of our members have gone through or made the call and are getting services. That will be helpful for us in terms of understanding what the capacity is and whether or not we need to do more or do something differently. So that's the current plan right now.
So is your department not Thrive?
It's the NYPD working with
New York Presbyterian.
Right, but I want to emphasize, because again, I hope everyone understands one of the things about mental health is it's a sprawling issue, and it's an issue we're all as a government, as a society, still trying to understand how best to address, and again, hasn't been addressed historically. City Hall, with all the tools we have, our OMB operations, Thrive, everything is going to constantly interrelate with PD on everything and anything we have to do. It's not like everything's entirely siloed. We're all trying to figure out solutions together. But on this, the composite, I think, is important, since we're not going to be asking for confidentiality, obviously, to be violated, but composite information from New York Presbyterian as they look across the cases they're getting, what kind of results they're seeing, what kind of trends they're seeing, what kind of needs they're seeing. The partnership that Steve just talked about, we are going to ask constantly, what do we need to do to keep making adjustments here to understand better what will work? And that's going to be ongoing. I understand a lot of times there's a desire on many issues to sort of flick a switch and say, okay, we have a problem, it's been solved. Mental health is different. Mental health, as Dr. Kleiman said, a lot of these are lifelong problems. A lot of them take constant innovations in terms of how to support someone. We're going to be in this for the long haul, but New York Presbyterian will certainly be able to say what they see working and not working and what changes we need.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me add, any suicide that happens is a failure, as far as we're concerned. That being said, some suicides will happen. And somebody who is committed to suicide will do it. What we hope is that this program will get to people before that decision of desperation, and that we see the suicide rate go down. That's going to be a multi-year process. What I think the initial thing would be is that access to care is improved, that we see the right numbers, that we get composite information from our psychiatrists and psychologists as to what problems are we seeing, how are we dealing with those problems, and that we, in some manner or means, show that we destigmatize the reach out for help. And that can be for anxiety, it can be for depression, it can be for frank suicidality. Those are the things that require partnership and require trust. And I think that that's important to build that trust with the officers to begin with, as well as with the police commissioners and the mayor.
You get someone in for more immediate crisis. It sounds like the process you're laying out may put them in a doctor's office a couple of days out. Do you have a more streamlined path in that case?
Yeah, absolutely. So if there is urgent need, we have the capacity to deal with urgent need on that day.
We'll deal with it 24/7. If somebody needs to be seen right away, we'll make sure that they're seen right away. We have people available 24/7, so no one's gonna wait thinking that they're gonna commit suicide for 24 hours before being seen. We'll deal with it right away.
Rich.
Has the incidence of suicide across the whole society gone up, or is it particularly seen within police departments across the country, or does anybody know that?
It's increased nationwide among the general population, adolescents, law enforcement, military. So it's a crisis throughout the country.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Studies have shown that firefighters, like police officers, have an increased risk of mental health problems like PTSD because they're also exposed to trauma on a regular basis. I'm just curious, how this program compares to resources that are available for firefighters and other first responders who may be grappling with the same kinds of issues that police officers face.
It's a fair question. I mean, obviously, the challenge, the crisis that we've seen of late has been with the NYPD, and that's where we're focused now. But it's a real conversation we'll have with the fire department as well. And again, I'm going to keep urging everyone to represent the bigger reality. Right now, something that is different in this city, not true around the country, unfortunately, but different in the city, is that anyone, whether they're a first responder, a public servant, or just any New Yorker, can call for immediate help 24 hours a day. And we didn't have that go-to option in the past. We do now, 888-NYC-WELL. And so, again, if it's a public servant, if it's a family of a public servant, anybody that thinks there's a problem can call that number. Now, state the obvious, and to the previous question, someone thinks something is about to happen right then, immediate threat to life, that's 911. That's always been true. So if anybody feels that someone's about to take their life right then, or someone poses a threat to others right then, call 911. Don't delay, just go. But if it's the kinds of stresses you're talking about starting to build up and people need help, 888-NYC-WELL not only is right then counseling, immediate counseling with a trained counselor, it's also a handoff to the next treatment, whatever it is, the next service that someone needs. But we will certainly have the conversation with fire department to see what they're thinking. Okay, we're going to see, go ahead, and then we'll go to other topics.
If a civilian has a gun in his house and there's a domestic dispute, a fight or some sort, perhaps due to stress, and the police are called, the guns are going to be seized. So you're giving the NYPD more latitude with their firearms? I mean, if a cop comes to your house and they see you fighting with someone and they say you have a gun in the house because you're licensed, they take that gun away right away because they don't want anything to happen. But now you're...
Different situation for you guys. Go ahead. Yeah, well, it sounds, if I understand your question, it seems like the same rules apply. Citizen versus officers, if I understand what you're saying. What's your point?
It sounds like you're letting the officers hold onto their firearms longer than a civilian because they're NYPD, even though they're going through similar stress.
Don't think...
No, that's not what we're saying.
Yeah, this is, you started respectfully by saying if there's a fight or something. We're not talking about if there's a fight or something.
Argument, like a fist fight.
Again, I respect, I think we should answer the larger reality. The frame of your question, I think, is confusing us a little bit.
Yeah.
If you heard before the scenario, which is rare, where it doesn't make sense for someone to still have their firearm. But the much bigger point here is we're trying to get people to talk about their problems to begin with, so we never get even near that. That's the point that was being made by Dr. Corwin and his colleagues, that we have got to get to first base here where people who have problems feel comfortable talking about their problems early before it ever gets to something more dangerous.
Right.
I'll just share a personal anecdote with you. So from the NYPD's perspective, organizationally, we have a professional obligation to take care of our personnel and field the best possible police force in the world, and we strive for that. But this also affects all of us on a very, very personal level as well. Many of us have personal experience with suicide, either personally or professionally, during the course of our careers. Just from my own experience, when I was a precinct commander, I had a young police officer who worked for me who died by suicide. I was speaking to him just a couple of days before it occurred, and then it was quite shocking. And it was very, very hopeless and helpless feeling because I did not see any warning signs, any indicators. So what we're trying to do now is recognize that, you know, this phenomenon cuts across all demographics. We have an obligation to talk about this the same way we talk about physical health, make sure everybody understands that there are resources available, and there's no shame in picking up that phone. As a matter of fact, it's a sign of strength to be able to come forward. It's very, very tough in our culture, right? We had questions before about perception and stigma, and certainly that exists. The police department in particular is a culture that rewards and cherishes strength, is perceived of as we're the people who respond to a crisis, not people who may be experiencing a crisis. So all of this is being done in lockstep with all the other measures we have in place, both internal and external resources, and all the training that continues to evolve in the department to begin to make those conversations more commonplace and encourage people to come forward and raise their comfort level, knowing that they have options that are readily available to them, and good, viable options.
Well said, Chief. Okay, we're going to take a break and turn over. I really need to go on to other topics, but go ahead quick.
How does the NYPD, how do the numbers compare with police departments across the country? You mentioned that it's a problem everywhere.
Do you have that, or do you need to get back on that?
It's so, you know what, there isn't really good data across the country. We know suicide generally for the past 2 decades has been increasing and cutting across all demographics. Police departments have seen spikes. The suicide rate amongst police officers as a profession, it's one of the professions most prone to suicide. That's nationally. We've seen spikes in other departments as well. Some departments are either very, very small, don't keep good records, so the data isn't conclusive.
Okay. Rich, finish up.
Very simple. So obviously this phone number is meant for the police officers only, but is it only the police officer feeling the impulse to kill himself, or is it for other police officers who want to provide?
Again, I thought we made it clear, but I'm going to make it clear again. If you're a police officer, first of all, you don't have to just be thinking you're going to kill yourself. It could be any problem. You could feel depressed. You could feel anxious. You could feel overwhelmed. You could have a family situation that you don't know how to deal with. You could feel like, you know, it's any one of us has ever felt that kind of the walls are closing in. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. That's where you pick up the phone. Because again, we want to get people who have a challenge early and help them, not when it gets to the point only where it's absolutely dire. So from someone who's just feeling constantly frustrated, depressed, confused, straight on up to, God forbid, someone who's thinking about suicide. But if another officer wants to call, again, want to make sure that that first part is clear because we really have to get that right. If another officer wants to call to try and help a fellow officer, someone help me on that scenario, whether it's here or another way.
Well, we have a number of scenarios where that would be the case. We're setting up this peer support network within the department, and so that's going to help. We're going to have clinicians and psychologists that'll be more in the field and connected with the boroughs, borough commands, and access to and regular contact with precincts. So we're hoping that all of this will help increase the opportunity for officers who are personally in stress and know that Chief Pontillo happens to be one of the support people, that I might say to Matt, hey, can I talk to you for 5 minutes about something? And then it goes from there. So I think there are any number of scenarios you could think about, but the goal and what we're trying to do is just increase the capacity of opportunities and services, make them available, and contact points at which officers feel comfortable and might feel more comfortable seeking help.
But I want to just ask it a little more specifically for everyone's benefit. If an officer feels a fellow officer is in crisis, is this a number they can call, or is it better to call the other type of options you have now, just so everyone can hear it?
Well, I think they can call this number, but they may also call or contact our medical division or psych services or one of those.
We have multiple internal resources too. Peer-to-peer counseling. We have employee assistance program. We have employee relationships program. We have a chaplain services program. We also have Papa on the outside. So there's a multiple choice. And you could always, we always encourage them that every member of service could go see their primary care or their private psychiatrist or psychologist. We encourage them to utilize through their insurance too, on top of it.
And we've been trained in all of the resources that are available through the city and through NYPD. So if someone does call, we will be able to facilitate connection to the right place to go to get that officer help.
Yeah, so I'll conclude with the same point. Always make the call. If you're not sure it's the right place to call anyway. Right? Because it'll get to the point the doctor made. If there's a better option, they'll help you get to it. But the most important thing is to pick up the phone and make that call when you need help. Okay, our friends from NY-Presbyterian, thank you so much. And we'll just take a moment before going to other topics. Brother, well done. Welcome back on the show. Okay. Okay, everybody, let's go to, whoops, put that back on. Let's go to other topics. Other topics, yes.
Question for you and Deputy Commissioner Tucker. I'm wondering how it is that an adult film actress named Anina Yukatis, who stars in movies like, quote, Big Titleist and Fast and Sexy, received a special tour of police headquarters, including the highly sensitive real-time crime center that receives 911 calls from victims. She also posted a film of an area marked NYPD personnel only.
Yeah, I have only heard the beginning of this, and I don't like what I hear. I don't understand how on earth this could have happened. I know it's being investigated, Commissioner.
No, you got it. I mean, we have the same question you have, and so we'll get to the bottom of it.
who, with the person who gave her access?
I don't know yet, but we'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
On that, also, Deputy Commissioner, when did you first learn of this tour? When did you?
Yesterday evening.
Did you learn about it from the Post story, from the news reports about it?
Well, I learned about it from one of my colleagues who saw the Post story. So, but in any case, as I just commented, we are looking into it and we'll get to the bottom of it. We'll answer the questions that you're asking right now.
Early voting, you said a couple weeks ago that you thought a month was enough time to prepare. Since then, we've heard from parents and teachers at schools where they're going to maybe lose their cafeteria or their gym or both for 10 days this year and for 30 days next year, that there are concerns about security. Do you think the DOE should have been planning for this more than just a month? And are you going to do anything? Do you have any power to do anything to make sure there are less schools being used for next elections?
A very fair question. So I was a public school parent. I absolutely understand any parent who is concerned, of course, first and foremost, security, but even down to the point of whether the gym or the cafeteria wouldn't be as available as much. Our job is to address this. It's a brand new reality, but it's something I absolutely think is necessary for our society to have early voting, something a lot of us have fought for a long time, because our democracy is starting to decline and people have not been voting, and we have to break through, and we know early voting is a big difference maker. And particularly with the schedules of New Yorkers, I think it's going to make a huge difference. Now remember, a lot of times the most valuable early voting happens on weekends, and that will not affect the issues that parents are concerned about. But look, I think we're all getting used to a new reality. We have a kind of quiet election year, election day coming up. It's a good chance to figure things out. Next year is not going to be quiet at all. So, we're going to have a lot to do from what we learn this time. If we think there's other locations that can work just as well, that's something, I'm certainly open to. But I want to emphasize that we will make sure there's security. Remember, when voting is happening, there is a police officer present, not just school safety, a police officer present, as is true at all polling sites. And that's true with early voting. We'll make sure buildings are secure. If there's some of the activities that happen in the school that sometimes won't be as good because of early voting, I would argue that to make our democracy work, that is a sacrifice worth making, but we want to minimize it, obviously. Go ahead.
Push for less schools next year?
Again, we can't project that. We got to first understand, based on this experience, because we're going to have one right now, how it goes, how much we can minimize the challenges, what are all alternatives we have. Some places, some other alternatives might work great, some might not, but it's just too early to tell. We do want to address the underlying issue. Aaron?
I have a police off-topic and then a regular off-topic. The police off-topic for both of you. President Trump's lawyer said yesterday that if he were to shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, he couldn't be arrested or investigated. Wondering if, in fact, he were to shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, would you arrest him? Would you treat that as a crime you could handle like any other?
If anybody shoots someone, they get arrested. I don't care if the President of the United States or anybody else. If you shoot someone, you should get arrested, and we would arrest him.
We would. It's as simple
Period.
as that.
It's not, I don't know, anyone who calls themselves a lawyer who could say that should not be a lawyer. Let's start with that. But if you shoot someone, that's a crime and no one is above the law. He would be arrested, period.
Okay. And the other question is the allegations against Councilmember Andy King. Do you believe that he should resign? And if he does not, do you believe the council should expel him?
I want to first express sorrow. I've known him for some years, but I've known his wife for decades, and it's just a very sad situation. This is, public office is supposed to be treated with care, and clearly that didn't happen here, and I'm pained. Some of the things I saw really surprised me and pained me. So the bottom line is you have to cooperate with an investigation. If you don't cooperate with an investigation, right there's a problem, and on top of that, to retaliate against people who did, I think it's disqualifying. So I think the speaker's right.
So do you believe he should be expelled? Because the speaker...
Again, I hope that we can end this. It's very, very sad. I hope that the councilman heeds the speaker's point. That would be the best way to resolve this.
Just to follow up on that, the speaker said that he should resign. You think that the councilman should resign?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, yesterday, there were 2 unprovoked attacks on MTA riders. A woman was shoved on a subway platform into a train. That video has actually gone viral, and 3 women were attacked on a city bus. I wonder how you think that happens, but what's your message to passengers who don't feel safe riding transit in their own city?
Okay, Marsha, I think we just have to see there's 2 profound realities here. The first is anyone who's attacked anywhere, anyone who feels unsafe, it's our job to address it. That's what the NYPD does every single day. If we see anything that suggests a problem, we're going to make sure that resources are there to address it. More resources are being put in the subways, for example. And as we know, when there's a place in the city where there's a problem, NYPD surges additional officers there. We're going to do that every single time where we see a problem. We also know that in terms of the MTA overall, crime has been driven down for years and years by the NYPD very, very effectively, and that we are at a point overall in the city where crime is about the level of the 1950s. And I'm just not going to allow the conversation to suggest anything but the reality. I talk to New Yorkers all the time who, in their own lives, see how profoundly this city has changed. They're very happy about the fact this city has changed. They're very proud of what the NYPD has done. They do not think it's the 1980s. It's not the 1980s. We're never going back there. So we see a problem, we address the problem. That's the simple reality.
Do you think that this has something to do with the overall mental health issues that the city is facing?
Again, I think there's always a challenge with mental health, as we discussed earlier. But I go back to the essence of things. We have the best police force in the country that whenever there's a problem, makes the adjustments. Crime is down to a level that no one imagined possible, and it's staying there, and that's incredibly good news. But there's no doubt at the same time, where problems are based on mental health, it's because we're reaching people too late. And we've got to reach people early in their challenge if we're going to really profoundly change things. Go ahead.
So there was an incident that was reported in Bay Ridge earlier this week where a woman at a department store told a Muslim woman in a hijab to go back to her country. And the woman's husband said that police officers he spoke with said they could not investigate the incident as a hate crime or would not. I'm wondering why that's the case. And whether that incident is now being looked at as a hate crime.
I don't know the details.
Yeah, I don't know the details either. I can get back to you on it.
Yeah, we'd have to know more to be able to comment.
And relatedly, if I could, so Mr. Mayor, last week you commented on the discrimination complaint filed against NYP Ferry by a group of Muslim families who said that they were refused service because of a security issue. I'm wondering what you've learned in the past week about what happened, what the investigation has uncovered, and what actions been taken.
We can get you an update today. I have not gotten the update yet on the investigation. Look, again, any discrimination is unacceptable. If it happened, there has to be changes and there has to be consequences for that. But I don't have the answer on the investigation right now. Yeah.
Hey, any updates about last night, yesterday's police combustion?
So actually, I'm going to be, later this afternoon, we'll be doing an update at One Police Plaza, put out some more information about where we are in the investigation.
We did have a report that it had been friendly fire. Is there anything you could say about that?
Well, I'll talk about it at 1 o'clock or 1:30, I think, whatever we've got it scheduled.
I was wondering if you could respond to the lawsuit filed by Officer Pantaleo over his termination. I mean, I suspect that one of the reasons why you did not express your opinion for several months was that you knew such a lawsuit was coming. So I was just curious your thoughts.
My only answer is this process was handled properly, and our lawyers are quite confident of that. Yeah.
Realizing the subway surge to contact EDP is brand new, basically, but are your officers making more contacts? How's it going, so to speak, in the last 48 hours?
I'm going to start and then you jump in, because
Yeah.
I just happened to talk to Chief Dilatory in detail about this yesterday. I think the NYPD is doing an outstanding job. And again, let's recognize that, NYPD, in addition to everything else, ends up coming in contact with a lot of folks with a mental health challenge or a substance challenge. Also folks who are homeless for whatever reason. And what we are seeing is the more contact, the more people who are accepting services. And this is very, very important for changing the overall reality. I think what NYPD did in transit, and I give them a lot of credit, coming up with the approach to summonses and saying to homeless folks in this case, you've got a situation here where you're going to get a summons, but we're going to give you an alternative to come in and get treatment and support, but you have to come in. It's actually working extraordinarily well, and I think that's going to help both reduce homelessness in the subway, but also, more importantly, get people to the ongoing treatment they need. So some of this is early, obviously, but I like what we're seeing so far.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Chief Dilatory it's Granular. He pays careful attention to, what's happening in the system, and so he pivots quite well. And this is one example of that type of police activity in terms of offering options when you can and when you should.
Yeah.
14th Street, the Department of Transportation is calling it a success. Do you plan on riding the bus?
Oh, sure.
When is the last time that you rode a bus? And are there thoughts about using this kind of a busway in any other major street, as the city council speaker is calling for?
We can let you know last time I rode a bus, and I definitely intend to ride it. And yes, we are encouraged by what we see. It is very funny how, in the weeks leading up to it, it was going to be, the apocalypse. And I want to say for the record, that this is one when the proposal came to me, I was the decider, as George W. Bush liked to say, that a man I quote often. I wanted to do this because we had a particular situation with the L train, and it was time to try this approach. But I also didn't want to prejudge the approach. I wanted to see, and not just over a couple of weeks, I wanted to see over a substantial period of time if it would work. And if it would work, it opens up some real possibilities for the city. So it went from it was going to be the most horrible thing in the history of the world to now a lot of people are saying, oh, this is amazing, let's do it everywhere. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like, first of all, it was never the most horrible thing. Second of all, the jury's not back yet. But we are encouraged. We're definitely encouraged. And if it proves to work, and if it proves not to have a lot of unintended consequences, then it could become a real option for other places as well. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I watched on Tuesday as you approached a group of 3 protesters outside of Max Fish ahead of that nightlife announcement. I also watched the day before when you ignored hundreds of Success Academy 4th graders who are rallying for a new middle school in City Hall. So I'm wondering why you didn't stop to talk to them and what kind of lessons that gives for students on civic engagement.
There's no lesson there at all, honestly, because depending on what's going on in my day, I might have the opportunity to stop, I might not. It all depends on the circumstance. And we've been down this road with Success Academy a whole lot of times, and they very cynically use young people in their strategies. And we have said to them, and said it publicly, the chancellor said it, that we're going to accommodate them with some space, but we have to make it work. And we've had lots of problems before with co-locations that did not work, and we're trying to get one that will work. And I'm just a little tired of the game they play. And on top of that, if for some reason we couldn't find a space that worked, they get money from the city because of state law to find an alternative location. So I've been to this movie before. Yes.
There have been a few rallies in the last few weeks and a report from the city controller earlier this week about the homeless and about this plan, very expensive plan to create more permanent, affordable housing. And saying that
when you say this very expensive plan, which very expensive plan are you referring to?
the homeless, forgive me, I don't remember the name of the plan, but all of these rallies pointed to this very specific plan to build more permanent, affordable.
Okay, so I'll do my best to speak to you, but I don't know which one you're specifically talking about, but go ahead, go to the core of your question.
This was in response to the murders of the 4 homeless men in Chinatown and just how vulnerable they are and how the need for housing is more critical now than the need for shelters. At least that's.
I think that's with all due respect to, I haven't seen the specific report, so I'm just going to speak very broadly. We have to have an honest conversation about folks who are on the street and are homeless. And I'm learning every day, but this is something I started working on when I was general welfare chair in the city council back in 2002. The folks on the street often are very resistant. There's a reason they're on the street. It's not good. I'm not happy about it, but I want to be honest about it. If it was simply, hey, we have a place for you to stay, we have that right now. They're offered it all the time. And a reminder that it's not just that they're offered immediate shelter, but we've been very, very public about the fact that for a lot of people who've gone into shelter, we've been able to get them to permanent housing. Certainly not instantly, that's not a reality. But over time, over 100,000 people in the last 6 years have gotten to affordable housing, which is a vast number of people and really needs to be considered. I feel like it gets left out of the discussion. I'm like, 100,000 people is a lot of people. But the problem is, this is why Homestead is so important. You've got people on the street who are contacted hundreds of times being offered help who will not accept it. And we have to keep deepening those strategies. So for anyone, even well-intentioned, who says, oh, if we just had housing, that would solve street homelessness, no, that's not the truth. Most street homelessness is about mental health and substance abuse challenges. That's what we have to solve first, before we can even get people into housing. Yeah.
Bringing up Aaron's question about President Trump. Your office announced over a year ago, or you announced over a year ago, that the city was looking into taxes that Mr. Trump and his businesses may or may not owe to the city after that big New York Times story. Is that, what's going on with that investigation? Is that still ongoing? Or
It was a real investigation. I'll find out the latest, because I thought that series of articles raised tremendous questions and obviously had potential ramification for city taxation. So, damn good question. We'll get you an answer.
Thanks, Mayor. Why did the city change its mind and the rules regarding the Supreme Court gun case, New York State Fiscal Rifle Association versus New York City, that's set to be heard soon? Why care if the case is heard, even though the city says the case is moot? And are you completely comfortable with that change of the rules that allowing people to legally own guns in the city to travel appropriately with their firearms, since this was not the stance of the city for so long?
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm only going to speak as a layman here. We worked at the NYPD, first of all. There's no stronger voice for sensible gun safety legislation and rules than NYPD. And the passion, if you listen to all my colleagues, but particularly I've heard Bill Bratton and then Jimmy O'Neill speak with very personal passion about why gun safety laws are necessary to protect our officers, let alone our civilians. Everything we did was City Hall, NYPD, City Council, everyone working together to protect strong gun safety laws. We ended up, and again, I'm speaking as a non-lawyer, we ended up with a complicated technical situation in terms of what was happening in the courts, and we had to address that. And everyone's been unified that this was the best way to protect long-term, real and usable gun safety laws. I don't know if you have anything to add, but that's my best attempt at summary. Okay.
Commissioner, I'm curious, in terms of the Andy King report from the City Council, are police considering any criminal probe into his behavior? I know that the council outlined some violations of certain city statutes.
Well, we haven't made any decisions along that line yet, as far as I know, so.
Yes.
I just had one quick mental health cop-related question I forgot to ask. I've been talking to an officer who's undergoing disciplinary probe, and he said he went to the employee assistance unit because he's dealing with a lot of stresses and having to do with the department and his family. And he said the employee assistance unit told them they couldn't help him because he was under a disciplinary investigation. Is that true? Do they not help cops who are being investigated?
I don't know under what circumstance that would occur. I doubt it.
So that is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
So whenever a member of the department is involved in a serious disciplinary matter, our employee assistance unit reaches out to them and makes it clear that they are not there to weigh in on or be involved in the disciplinary matter, but are there to offer them services if they need it, or their family services as well. So without knowing all the facts of that case, I could not offer an opinion on that case. But in general, no, we separate the two. But we also have to balance those equities. But the employee assistance services are available to everyone.
And if anyone misinformed the officer, we need to address that. So again, I'm glad you're raising it, and we want to respect the confidentiality of your conversation. But
Specifically, he was put in Viper, where a lot of cops who are being investigated go, and it's like a 3-hour commute from his home, and he's dealing with a child custody
well, I'd like,
case.
We can look into that.
To have a.
He was given highway therapy, and that no, he couldn't be.
Right. We want to see any way that we can address the concerns of the officer, and Chief will follow up with you, and obviously we've done confidentially. But I'm saying further, if any other member of the department told someone they couldn't seek help because they were in a disciplinary process, we need to get to that person and correct that mistake, because a disciplinary process does not presume the outcome. We're in America, it's innocent until proven guilty, and you're a member of the service, you get the support available to everyone.
And I just follow up because, for now, for the last 5 years, one of the things that we focused on is discipline and how it's handled and leveling the playing field. And this whole notion of building trust outside is also important to build trust inside, and how we treat our officers. And so we've gone out of our way to make sure that the system and the way people are disciplined is appropriate, the charges are appropriate, that the penalties are appropriate, and certainly, when it comes to people who need help, we're not, that notion of highway therapy, as if that's the phrase he used, sending people, to the other end of the city from where they live, is just not something that's part of the scenario today.
That's right.
All right. It hasn't happened in 5 years, as far as I know. If it has, we've worked hard to make sure that that's not the case.
And we'll address it.
When we find out we'll address it.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.